approaching each other. And as you said, at some point I can totally see that these worlds commingle and they sort of intertwine, where you have maybe shared custody with your bank. So you have a key as a customer, the bank has a key, and maybe a third, like trusted trustee or something, has a key as well. I mean, these things are still being figured out as we speak, because there's also the whole legal background, the whole compliance stuff. From our perspective as a bank, it's really hard to say, okay, we now sort of give custody up to some third party as well, because we are not allowed to sometimes legally. So I think there the legal code also sort of has to change. But I think this is the natural evolution, and we will get there at some point that these things will become possible.
Yeah, and especially when you have collaborative custody, and also some sort of, because collaborative custody is really an interesting solution where you have a partner, but you still have the control of it. And there's custody solutions also where you only have one key out of two. So then it's more of a proof of reserve, in my opinion, that you at least see it on chain. But it's better than have it just on an exchange. Are you do you think that this concept of proof of reserve and this concept of transparency and verify yourself will actually also get into all those institutions? I mean, we just heard, because you mentioned him before, Seyr, who made really good points also against that when you're a publicly traded company. How do you look at proof of reserve and this ethos of trusting only yourself?
Yeah, exactly. It's actually a valid argument that we're having here, because I think it's not so clear cut. It's not black and white. And as you said, Seyr makes some great points, being a public company with all the challenges that come along with this as well. At the same point, people point to other arguments, which I think are valid as well, because this is what I like about Bitcoin. It is sort of different. And if we now just go along in the typical way how everything has been built in the traditional system, then we're not gaining that much, when it comes to we might have Bitcoin and the base layer and everything, and there it's super transparent, and all these principles are sort of also enshrined. But I'd like to see a world where this is sort of spawns some other things in the traditional world as well, and Bitcoin having an impact, and changing things in that world. I think in the end, this will come. It might not be adopted through the real traditional companies. Maybe Seyr is even too much of a traditional company. I could even imagine that our bank, being traditional, might never really go down this route. But I could imagine that the new incumbent, or like the new startups that are challenging the incumbents, that they will sort of implement this, because they're coming from a sort of green grass environment where they can just really start things up anew, maybe also work with the regulator and figure things out. For example, I might have Jack Mallers in mind, who has a different view to Seyr, and with his company, he might take another approach. And I think that's usually how new innovation, which is really disruptive, also then unfolds itself. It's the new players who adopt the new strategies, and not so much the old ones who are really enshrined and just sort of too much stuck in the old system. Maybe one or two companies make it, and then we'll see it. But that's how I see it unfold, and I hope it will unfold that way, because as I said, this is what Bitcoin is about, and it would be nice if Bitcoin would really have an impact on the traditional system itself by sort of forcing its principle on the system as well.
It's super interesting when you think about what Bitcoin's impact will be, because we probably don't have a real clue. If you look at any really disruptive technology in the first 10 years, it's kind of the starting point, 10, 15 years, and then the real change happens within the next 20, 30, 50 years. So it's really hard for us to see, okay, what did Bitcoin do now in the last 15 years? Yeah, it built itself out. It made it made its way to many different people, many different companies, many different institutions. But what is the real impact Bitcoin will actually have on the traditional financial space, on companies, on individuals in 50, 100 years. Are you convinced that those traditional financial space and I guess we can just call it fiat system, that this will eventually die off because Bitcoin is just too strong and spreads too fast?
Yeah, I really haven't made up my mind about this, because obviously from a idealistic heart that I have within me, I would hope so. But at the same time, I think, well, I just see too many forces pulling on the other end, that the fiat will in some shape or form really be with us and probably never go extinct. I have a feeling that this will sort of balance itself out, and the fiat system will always be around. This is also something that we touch upon in the book, where we make this really tangible comparison to the Reformation, and the Catholic Church. And many people have done this before as well, but where we're saying, okay, the Catholic Church, the church itself, it's still around today. Some people are still clinging to it, and it's really important in their lives, but it doesn't have this overarching grip anymore. And there's a lot of other systems that have come up and that are sort of competing with it. And I could imagine the fiat system going the same route, in the end, that it will never really go extinct. There will always be sort of three systems in that sense. We'll always have the old fiat system, which will probably shrink in relevance and in size, but it will never go extinct. Then you have sort of the hybrid system, where like some people are, it's sort of Bitcoin, it's sort of fiat, and that's what the system which I think will grow the most, because Bitcoin is such a strong force and will really force itself upon the fiat system without really making it entirely obsolete. And then you will have like the Bitcoin only system, the guys who are really Bitcoin only, who really don't want to touch fiat, don't even want to go into stable coins, really want to live off grid. I have a feeling that this will never really take off as well, just because people are not like this. But I mean, maybe that's just my angle and my perspective from where I come. Maybe in 30, 40, 50 years time, the world has moved on and people think entirely differently. And then something like this is entirely possible. But this is sort of my thinking on the topic. Maybe for some, this is too much of a boomer thinking, but I just can't really get myself to be too convinced and too hyped up if I will ever see something like this in my lifetime.
The question of time is really valid, because I'm fully convinced that we will be on a sound money standard at some point. But what if it takes 1,000 years? Like it's something that is definitely possible for in my eyes. I like the comparison with cars and horses, and you've seen those popular pictures probably a lot, where you see the city, I think in New York it was, where you see like a lot of horses in like one car, and then 10 years later you see a lot of cars and just like one horse. And still to this day, you've mentioned you also lived in Vienna. In Vienna on Sunday, you can still see the horse carriages sometimes running around in the main city. So the horse as a vehicle to go from A to B never fully went away, because there's some nostalgic value, or people maybe like the feeling of sitting back and being in the old times. I don't think the fiat system has that value. That people are like nostalgic. I want to transact today with some old euros, especially if we move digitally. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just want to throw in, because maybe there is some nostalgic value to this, because you've probably seen these people who have like these images like I have in the background, and they have like a $1 trillion note of Zimbabwe, sort of hanging in there. And that's also then sort of a nostalgic, almost even funny, artsy thing that they have. So maybe this is the way the fiat system will go in the end. We will never know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you only see it in museums and like the old cars or like the things, but it's this is the always the point that I'm getting to. We're all just guessing what Bitcoin really will do in 50 years, because it's so disruptive and so fast that like what do we really like? How does it really change our financial system? It's really hard to say for me.
Yeah, I think it's the only valid way to think, because everything else would sort of be hubris, because we as people, we really can't look into the future. We can try to extrapolate based on a theory that we have, and the more logical this theory is, the better. And that's again where we are at Austrian economics, where I think this gives you a really good toolkit to think about the future and where things might be going. But then you can also quickly be blinded by ideology, I would say, and by being too idealistic about something. And that's where having studied the monetary system for 10 years now, and really reading tons of books also now for the book that we published, I sort of couldn't shed the impression that the money was always, wherever we look, it was very hard. It was very interwoven with government. There was a lot of government involvement always with money, and that's for me where I'm not sure where the comparison also breaks down. If we compare like car, horse, which is like sort of this technology, the car was a lot better, obviously, but there was not that many maybe power games involved. Whereas with money, it's really this one technology that is really a power technology, and then we're talking about Jason Lowry and Robert Breedlove that had talked about this topic as well. But I mean, this is really something where I'm not sure if governments will ever let go of this. Maybe at some point they will have, because as Seyfedin would probably argue, everyone flocks to harder money, and that's when they cannot do anything about it. But to me, it feels like, having studied this monetary history, they always had some trick up their sleeve to, again, co-opt part of the new system as well. And I would argue Bitcoin is not like naturally immune to this. Something like this might also happen. And so, I just want to sort of be cautious, but this doesn't mean for me and for everybody else that we should work towards such a future and try to establish a Bitcoinized world that is really true to its ethos as good as possible. Yeah.
I'm always wondering how someone would co-opt the Bitcoin system. And I think the best way is to make people really focused on store of value, really focused on number co-op technology, build a bunch of products around it, and convince people to give up the control of the Bitcoin into centralized institutions. Basically the gold game. How do you look at that? And also borrowing against your Bitcoin becomes more and more popular in the scene. Is that is that also for you the most valid way of co-opting a cash peer-to-peer cash system?
Yeah, I would assume so. Yeah, because again, on the base layer itself, on the Bitcoin network level itself, it's probably really, really hard to co-opt it, because Bitcoin was so elegantly built in that sense. So I think on a base layer perspective, it's really hard to be co-opted. But then again, exactly, this is how it's probably how it would unfold, and the sort of cautious and almost already sad thing is that we've been seeing this lately, with all the corporate treasury adoption, with government potentially adopting Bitcoin, and a lot of people are cheering for this. And I have like two sort of souls in my breast as well, because it's sort of a vindication in front of all your family that you've been talking about Bitcoin, and now the price is going up because of all these people who flock and all these institutions that come in, and then you're like, okay, I have been right, and that feels sort of great. But at the same time, if you're really, as a true libertarian, or reflecting on this, you're like, okay, I'm not sure if this is really what we want, because I see the tendency and the potential threat that this could go down the sort of, as you said, the gold route, where gold, and we established this in the book quite extensively as well, how gold, these standards over history have been watered down, through centuries of centralization. And Lynn Alden, in her book Broken Money, has written on this, and now we established this quite extensively as well, that yeah, every time there was a war, or there was like some calamity, the gold standard was way watered down. A less potent version was brought back in, and in the end, we ended up with a paper tiger version of a gold standard, and then you could sort of really get rid of it, you know. And this is something I am actually worried with Bitcoin, especially when it comes to the Bitcoinized financial system, where then more humans are involved again. Yeah, so that's sort of my a struggle that I have mentally.
It's really interesting. You're one of the few that I think one of the I think, I don't know, maybe you're the only one, but one of the few. No, Rahim was also on the podcast. He also was into Austrian economics before before Bitcoin. But most Bitcoiners today discover Austrian economics through Bitcoin and not Austrian economics and then Bitcoin. What intrigued you with Austrian economics?
Yeah, and I have to give tribute to Rahim. It was really he that really not piqued my interest, but then really got it going.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.